What is up, everybody, and welcome back to the channel for the second Ask Me Anything episode of the 2024-25 NHL season. As always, when it comes to these videos, I want to give a huge shout out and say thank you to each and every one of you who took the time to come up with a question and leave it on the post. Even if your question isn't featured in this episode, just know I read every single one and I appreciate all of you guys. And if this is your first time checking out the channel and you want more NHL content just like this all year long, be sure to hit that subscribe button. We are trying to hit 100,000 subscribers this NHL season. And with that all being said, let's go ahead and start the episode off with the first question from YouTube channel 7, who says, I know the season is early, but who has been the best free agent signing so far and who has been the worst in your opinion? Obviously, we can only base this off of the very small sample size that we've gotten so far this season. So with that in mind, I feel like the worst has to be Steven Stamkos, who signed a 4-year, $32 million deal with the Predators in the offseason, a cap hit of $8 million per season. And so far, he's been very underwhelming with just 1 goal in 5 games. That goal is his only points, and not only is Stamkos not producing, the team is not winning, as Nashville is currently the only team in the National Hockey League that has yet to register a point. They are 0-5, all 5 regulation losses. It looks like switching teams after spending 16 seasons with the Tampa Bay Lightning has been a little bit more difficult of a transition for Steven Stamkos than some of us may have thought. It should also be mentioned that he now doesn't have one of the best, maybe the best playmakers in the entire NHL, Nikita Kucherov, dishing him pucks on the power play anymore. He's also 34 years old. It's not unrealistic that this could be the start of his decline. Now, with that all being said, I don't think anyone really expects things to stay this way. Stamkos is going to start to score. He's going to start to produce, but maybe just at a much smaller rate than his last few seasons with the Tampa Bay Lightning. So Stamkos would be my answer for the worst free agent signing so far. In terms of the best, honestly, the first that comes to my mind is Tyler Toffoli signing a 4-year, $24 million deal with the San Jose Sharks, a cap hit of $6 million per season. He has been fantastic for them so far. He's honestly one of the few players on that team that is actually producing right now. Through his first 6 games of the season, Tyler Toffoli leads the Sharks in goals with 4 and points with 7. And although we only got to see him on a line with Macklin Celebrini for 1 game, that line looked very good in that 1 game. It's looking like Tyler Toffoli is going to be the perfect kind of veteran player to help ease some of these younger guys into the NHL, play top-line minutes with them, and help them not get caved in those top-line minutes on a pretty poor San Jose Sharks team. Moving on now to the next question. This one comes from Justin Ouellette, who says, biggest surprise player and biggest disappointing player. I do actually plan on making a video on the most surprising and disappointing players so far this season soon, but I guess I can answer this question and give you guys maybe a little bit of a sneak peek onto some players who could be in that video. For one of the most surprising players, I definitely have to go with Philip Broberg, defenseman for the St. Louis Blues, who obviously came over from Edmonton to St. Louis in the offseason along with Dylan Holloway thanks to a couple of offer sheets. And again, it's still very early on in the season, but so far Philip Broberg is making the St. Louis Blues look like geniuses. Through his first 6 games this season, he's already up to a goal and 5 assists for 6 points. He has a +6 rating and is averaging almost 20 minutes of ice time per game. This is obviously the biggest opportunity Philip Broberg has had to showcase his abilities up until this point in his NHL career. Even when he was in the lineup for short stints with the Edmonton Oilers, he wasn't getting a ton of minutes. So it's definitely been pretty cool to see Philip Broberg making the most out of this opportunity. I have been seeing a lot of people dunking on the Edmonton Oilers for letting him walk and not matching the offer sheet. And I'll admit, it is kind of funny that Philip Broberg has more points than any Oilers blue liner and is actually tied with McDavid. And I will admit, it is kind of funny that Philip Broberg is actually tied with McDavid in points on the season, has the exact same stat line, a goal and 5 assists in 6 games. But let's be real here, hindsight is 2020, and at the time, it did not make sense for the Oilers to match the offer sheet St. Louis gave to Philip Broberg based off of what Philip Broberg had done up until that point in his career with the Oilers, and especially given the Oilers cap situation. So just because Philip Broberg is off to a hot start to the season with St. Louis, it doesn't change that fact. Now, speaking of the Edmonton Oilers, one of my most disappointing players so far, I think I gotta go with Zach Hyman. The guy scored a career high 54 goals last season in 80 games, was a monster in the playoffs as well with 16 in 25 games, a total of 70 goals last season for Hyman between the regular season and the playoffs, just insane. And so far this season through 6 games, not only has he yet to score a goal, he's actually yet to register a point. Now, if I was an Oilers fan, I wouldn't be that concerned with Zach Hyman though. It would be different if he was wasn't getting chances, but the Oilers are getting chances with Hyman on the ice. They're out-chancing opponents with Hyman on the ice. According to Natural Stat Trick, Zach Hyman has an expected goals for percentage at 5-on-5 of almost 60%. Zach Hyman also does a lot of his damage on the power play, and so far this season, the Oilers' power play is clicking at just 6.7%. It's only a matter of time before that power play starts to click and they figure things out, and when that happens, I think it'll lead to a lot of Hyman goals. Moving on now to the next question. This one comes from Dom, who says, I know it may be too soon for a coaching change in Detroit, but what would have to happen for you to consider one? If you were a GM, who would be your preferred choice from the available coaches, Gerard Gallant or more controversial Joel Quenneville? I have seen a lot of Red Wings fans already calling for a coaching change, which I think is kind of ridiculous. I don't put any of the Red Wings struggles really on Derek Lalonde. I just think the roster isn't good enough yet for the Red Wings to be a legit playoff team. The reality is they overachieved last season, and I think that led to a lot of people having way too high of expectations for them coming into this season. I honestly think there should be a lot more criticism placed on Steve Yzerman right now than Derek Lalonde. Now, that does not mean I think Steve Yzerman should be fired. I do not think that at all, but I do feel like it's fair to criticize the way he's gone about some things over these last couple of years. The next question we have comes from Hatcher Cade, who says, thoughts on the Jets being 5-0? They look like, from top to bottom, the best team in the league right now. It's very impressive what they've been able to do early on this season. That team is clicking on all cylinders, offensively, defensively. They have arguably the best goaltender in Connor Hellebuck. They currently have the league's #1 ranked power play. It's clicking at 43.8%, which you have to imagine is a sight to behold for Jets fans because their power play was not very good last season. I think the biggest thing that stands out to me so far this season when it comes to the Winnipeg Jets is the depth. All 4 lines are rolling. All 4 lines are scoring. They currently have 7 players on the roster who are a point per game. Their forecheck is lethal, especially the 3rd and 4th lines. The Jets' bottom 6 has to be in the conversation for one of the best bottom 6s in the league. Obviously, they're not going to go undefeated, but if they can find a way to consistently play like this all throughout the season, I think there's a very good chance we see Winnipeg finish as the 1st or 2nd seed in the entire Western Conference this season. But that's the thing. Can they consistently play like this throughout an entire season? Because we have seen the Jets get off to very hot starts over the last couple of years and then kind of fizzle out. Moving on now, this next question comes from Mr. Cat, who says, with how Nashville is playing right now and being 0-5, how do you think they are going to do this year? There really just isn't anything going right for the Nashville Predators right now. They can't score like we talked about earlier in this video. Stamkos has just 1 point in 5 games. Nyquist has just 1 point. Tommy Novak has gotten off to a slow start, and that's a guy that a lot of people predicted to have a breakout year playing as their second line center between Marchessault and Stamkos. That hasn't really worked out. The team defense has not been good enough. When it comes to the goaltending, I don't think you can put all the blame on Saros for Nashville's slow start, but it's not like he's really been bailing them out either. We know Saros is capable of being much better than he's been so far this season. You have to think something's got to give soon, and they're going to start to turn things around and at least just win a couple of games. I'm definitely not going to sit here and write Nashville off, but an 0-5 start is already a pretty big hole, and the longer this goes on, the season can quickly get away from you. I still got some faith that at the end of the season, this is going to be a team fighting for a playoff spot, but it definitely doesn't look like they're going to be a lock to make the playoffs in the Western Conference this season like a lot of people expected they would be coming into the season, myself included. Moving on now to the next question. This one comes from Anything Sports, who says, I know he has only played 3 games, but do you think Joel Hofer can steal the starting job from Jordan Binnington this season? I definitely think he can, 100%. It wouldn't be the first time throughout his career that we've seen Jordan Binnington lose his starting job throughout a season. It happened back in the 2021-22 season where Ville Husso kind of took the reins as the starter. Binnington is one of those guys where at his best he's so good, and we saw that last season, but he's just super inconsistent. So if you're St. Louis, I think it's only right to ride the hot hand, and right now, like you said, it's only been 3 games, but Joel Hofer has the hot hand. He has been fantastic so far, and until he cools off, I think he should be the one starting more games. Next up, this question comes from Josh, who says, does Marco Casper have what it takes to be in the Red Wings lineup for the rest of the season? My answer to this would be yes. I've said it multiple times already this season that I think he should have been in the opening night lineup. That's obviously not what happened. He started the season in Grand Rapids, but he was called up for the Red Wings' most recent game against the Predators thanks to a Tyler Mott injury, and Marco Casper's performance in that game I feel like just hammered home the fact that this guy should have been in the opening night lineup. cap. I don't think he should see an AHL game for the rest of the season. I feel like Casper was one of the Red Wings' better forwards. He picked up an assist in the game, which was his first career point. He was a +2, and there was actually only 4 Red Wings forwards who had more ice time in that game against the Predators than Marco Casper, and those guys were Dylan Larkin, Alex DeBrincat, Lucas Raymond, and JT Compher. He's a really smart player. He's the kind of player you can utilize in almost any situation. He actually killed some penalties in that game against Nashville. I really liked what I saw from him, and I really believe if he continues to play like he did in that game against Nashville, there's just no way the Red Wings can justify sending him back down to the AHL. This next question comes from Michael, who says, what are your thoughts on Yaroslav Askarov with the CUDA? So far, he's played 2 games with 2 wins and 2 shutouts. Would love to hear your thoughts, and when do you think the Sharks should call him up? I honestly think no matter how good Askarov is in the AHL this season, he's probably going to play the entire year down there. Now, obviously, if there's an injury to Blackwood or Vanacek, then he's going to get a call up, but I think as long as those 2 guys are healthy, they're probably going to be the guys in net for the Sharks this season. The reality is the Sharks aren't going to be anywhere close to playoff contention this season. They're still winless. The team is not good defensively. Blackwood and Vanacek's numbers aren't great. I don't think it makes sense to really call up Askarov and just throw him to the Wolves right now anyways. Vanacek and Blackwood are both set to become UFAs at the end of the season, so I think next season is probably where we see Askarov come up and start to be a full-time NHLer, and by next season, the team in front of Askarov should be, at least a little bit better than the team that would be in front of him this season. I feel like a lot of people thought just because, he didn't want to report to the AHL in Nashville and he wanted to be traded that he would have to play in the NHL this season. I don't really think that was the case. I just think, after they signed Saros to an 8-year extension, there just was no path to Askarov becoming a starting goaltender in Nashville. And in San Jose, despite the fact that he has started this season in the AHL, and I think he will continue to play this season down there, there's a clear path for him, and it's likely next season. Next up, this question comes from OMFG, who says, which franchise that has not yet won a cup do you think has the best chance of winning one? I definitely feel like it's between these 2 teams. Vancouver, obviously they haven't been unreal to start the season, but I still think that's a very good team that could go on a run. But I think the clear-cut answer, we talked about this team earlier in the video, right now has to be the Winnipeg Jets, right? Next up, this question comes from Mind Wizard, who says, do you think that Aiden Hill's continued struggles may be an issue for Vegas? It feels like he has taken a hit in stats since his injury last season. Yeah, he definitely hasn't looked the same since his injury. He's been pretty rough to start this season. I feel like when it comes to goaltenders outside of the top 7 or 8, you just never really know what to expect from season to season. When it comes to Aiden Hill, the reality is he got paid because of that unreal playoff run where he really backstopped Vegas to that Stanley Cup in 2023. Outside of that, it's not like he's been, a world beater throughout his career. Luckily for the Golden Knights, although Aiden Hill is struggling this season, Samsonov has looked very good in the games he's played, and go figure, because Samsonov was one of the worst goalies in the league last season. Again, just really hammering home the fact that you never really know what to expect from goaltenders unless their names are Hellebuck, Vasilevsky, Shesterkin, the elite of the elite goaltenders in the league. I've been seeing a lot of discourse going around on social media in regards to Dylan Cozens, and I think it all really started because the Calgary Flames, or Frank Seravalli, came out and said the Calgary Flames are in the market for a center that kind of fits their 5 to 7 year plan, maybe a younger centerman, and people started throwing out the idea of Dylan Cozens. I honestly don't think that makes any sense for the Buffalo Sabres. I do not think they should trade Dylan Cozens, especially right now. The guy only has 2 assists in 7 games, only had 18 goals in 79 games last year after a 31-goal season in 2022-23. His value is probably at an all-time low right now. It just doesn't make any sense at all for them to move him. If they do, I can guarantee they aren't getting back a player in a trade package that is better than Dylan Cozens, or is going to be better than Dylan Cozens in the future. I think it would be a huge overreaction and just a terrible decision if the Sabres did decide to move him. So that's kind of where I'm at on this. I know it didn't really answer your question. Your question was, what would the return look like? Well, I don't even really want to get that far because I just don't think they should trade him, and I don't think they will. So that is going to wrap up this week's episode of the Ask Me Anything series. If you guys enjoyed this episode and you want another one next Monday, then be sure to leave this video a like. That is the best way to let me know that you enjoyed, and it does actually help out the videos a ton. And most importantly, if this was your first time checking out the channel and you want more NHL content just like this all season long, be sure to hit that subscribe button, and I will talk to you all again soon.